days away from the Japanese Grand Prix, or really like a day and a half, because over here in America, it feels like the world is flipped upside down while we are in Japan for the Grand Prix. And we have plenty of headlines to go over for this weekend. A lot of exciting stuff, but really the best track when it comes to actually watching the cars for the Grand Prix. I'm sorry if I sound a little different. I am a little bit under the weather, but it is a race weekend and I still want to provide you guys with some entertainment and some content. So let's talk about the biggest headlines going into Japan. First one I wanted to cover, which was something I didn't catch, but I thought it was very cool. During the Singapore Grand Prix, when Carlos actually won the race, he did a Schumacher type of celebration. And I kind of just wanted to put it up for you guys. I think it's like a subtle little thing that he kind of gave to the fans. I thought it was pretty cool. Gotta love Carlos. He's such a good guy, but also like genuinely such a fun racer to watch. The best racer in my opinion so far in the second half of the season. Next news is for an ex-Formula 1 driver, actually. It's about De Vries. De Vries is actually poised to get the 2024 Toyota WEC seat after his alphatauri exit, which is a huge thing. So he could actually be a potential champion because the Toyota in WEC is amazing, and they have won Le Mans for the past 4 years with the exception of like this one that Ferrari won this year. So happy for him to actually be driving again in some type of competition because he still is a good driver regardless of how his Formula 1 season went. And he's genuinely a good guy. You can't not like Nick De Vries, in my personal opinion, unless you have some vendetta of him doing not that well. Another article was about James Vowles talking about the lunge that Perez made on Albon, and I actually failed to see this in my Sunday video and really bring it up, but Perez was dirty, man. Holy, he did not have a great Singapore Grand Prix. And really, James Vowles talks about how this is just kind of like a dishonorable thing to do. The way that he went for his lunge, he tried this a couple of times in the race, and it was just an unfair overtaking attempt, honestly. It was unfair. It screwed Albon. Albon had potential to hit P8 on the better strategy, but Perez went for a crazy lunge. And Vowles talks about this being valuable for the team and stuff like this can really hurt them in the season because obviously they're a lower end team. So going for points on a track that you never expected it to be on is a huge thing. So I get his frustration. Albon did not sound happy over the radio, and I don't blame him. I wouldn't be happy either considering what happened. Now, here is another huge article. This is talking about really alphatauri and the update that they're talking about for Liam Lawson. So it seems to be that Yuki will be confirmed in just a couple of days now in the Japanese Grand Prix. Whether that'll be Friday, Saturday, or Sunday, or maybe even on Thursday, Yuki will be confirmed for his seat. And it looks like Daniel Ricciardo is going to be that second seat after points for Lawson here in Singapore. That's pretty crazy that they're making an announcement like this. And their thought process must be that Liam Lawson is actually looking to stay with Red Bull till 2025, being a reserve role and seeing what they do with him in 2025. Now, I don't really agree to this. If they're going to do anything, I would, unfortunately, maybe put in Liam and Daniel because that is an upgrading team. I know they want Daniel for the reason of, oh, this team could become, Adidas is now actually being talked about as the biggest sponsor for the new alphatauri team. So instead of Hugo Boss Racing, it would be Adidas Racing, which could be cooler. Maybe the livery would look very slick. Maybe some gold and black. That'd look kind of cool. Adidas loves having additions like that on really their shoes and in general clothing. So I think a gold and black livery would look sick. Something better than the Rich Energy, obviously, livery. Regardless of that, though, this is kind of unfortunate for Liam Lawson. The CEO is telling about his stance for Daniel Ricciardo and where they kind of see the seats being in general. So as I'm sitting here and editing the video, some other stuff has came out. I wanted to mention it. I'll put this in the middle of the video. It's about Lance Stroll, and they're saying that he's not going to actually race in the Japanese Grand Prix. And there's no confirmed reserve driver yet or anything really of that sort. So, take this with a grain of salt, their tweets. But one of the tweets was by somebody that actually is pretty good at rumors, so on. So, let's see what actually happens with this. I would expect him to race, but they're saying he might have like a severe concussion, so he might not be here. It is a quick turnaround. I'd love to see Vettel. I would love to see Vettel in this Aston Martin car if that happens, but the more than likely outcome will be Drogovic. I wanted to also bring up the whole entire Lewis Hamilton was alone type thing on the podium. More of this was discussed and talked about. Obviously, we didn't get the full picture in the beginning, and people were making articles about Mercedes doesn't deserve Lewis Hamilton's loyalty and so on. They didn't not want to be there. They wanted to be there, but the actual podium itself is very small, and the way that it's conducted, only really Ferrari could be there. Even McLaren was a lot less people, but they got enough people to actually be able to get there before the Ferrari squad. It's a smaller celebration zone, and the Mercedes engineers couldn't get there. Obviously, they were happy that he got on the podium, and they celebrated with him later on in the paddock. It just didn't look like that on the TV. So obviously Mercedes is there for Lewis Hamilton. Come on, he wouldn't sign a contract if he didn't think that. So, well, let's not get over the roof with this. Lewis is obviously going to be celebrated. The guy's a king. I mean, he drove insane in that Singapore Grand Prix, and I expect Japan to be another strong one for him. I already talked to you about the whole entire Liam Lawson, Daniel Ricciardo, Yuki, Tsunoda situation, but just to go about it again, it's a big talking point into this weekend. I want to hear your thoughts onto who should actually get this race seat, and leave it below in the comments. I've made a couple of videos now, and it's still being talked about. Right now, the favorites look like Yuki and Daniel, because they're very profitable for the new brand coming in, so it kind of makes sense, sadly. Now, the biggest thing that I want to talk about and cover is something that it's fun to look at stuff like this, but it's very unfortunate for somebody like an Aston Martin fan like me, a Williams fan, man, even Red Bull racking it up, but the actual Destructors Championship, the guys that are putting it in the wall and being a pain in the you-know-what for the team when it comes to fixing. Well, Lance Stroll just had a absolute shunt and hit that wall at a fantastically fast speed. Obviously not fun, but that actual crash costed him 1.2 million. That guy loves to rack up the money into Aston Martin, and not because of points, but because of crashing. And Logan Sargent, Lance, and Perez are the only 3 drivers on this grid, actually, that are over $2 million. Like, that is a absurd amount. And the biggest crash actually still being Logan Sargent in the Netherlands, so that crash must have really cost a lot for that team. It must have been a whole entire... Yeah, it looks like Casio was practically replaced over there. So, yeah, it was a big shunt over there for Logan Sargent. And I'm assuming the gearbox, too, and a couple of other things. And on the bottom, you see Max Verstappen, Bottas, Alonso, Hamilton. I mean, Norris, your usual. Mercedes has been very good on money. Same with Alfa Romeo. Even Haas, kind of racking it up a little bit, but not as much as if they had Mick Schumacher. Mick Schumacher racked that boy up. But even Nick de Vries is in the top 10 here. That's a pretty crazy statistic. But all in all, this is what I got for the headlines going into the weekend, and I want to thank you guys. You guys are amazing, so thank you so much for the support. If you haven't, please hit that like, subscribe. It means the world.